Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that insurance claims assessors often face situations requiring them to interpret and apply the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, to non-standard customer requests. If a policyholder submits a claim that appears to fall outside the insurer's typical processing guidelines, but is not explicitly excluded by the policy wording, what is the most appropriate initial approach for the claims assessor to adopt in accordance with the GICOP? Option A. Agree to the request without further investigation to expedite the process and ensure customer satisfaction. Option B. Defer any response to the customer until a definitive internal policy can be established for such requests. Option C. Acknowledge the request, investigate its merits and feasibility in line with GICOP principles and policy terms, and communicate the findings. Option D. Immediately reject the claim as it deviates from standard processing procedures. Correct answer is D. Immediately reject the claim as it deviates from standard processing procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurance claims assessor to balance the need for efficient claims processing with the fundamental obligations outlined in the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020. GICOP. The assessor must interpret and apply the GICOP principles to a situation where a customer's request might seem unusual or potentially outside standard procedures, but still falls within the spirit of fair treatment and clear communication. The challenge lies in avoiding a knee-jerk reaction that prioritizes speed over compliance and customer rights. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves acknowledging the customer's request and initiating a process to investigate its validity and feasibility in line with GICOP principles. This demonstrates a commitment to the GICOP emphasis on fair treatment, transparency, and providing clear explanations. Specifically, it aligns with the GICOP requirements for insurers to handle claims efficiently and fairly, and to communicate effectively with policyholders. By seeking clarification and exploring options, the assessor upholds the GICOP spirit of customer centricity and due diligence. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately dismiss the request without investigation, citing it as outside standard procedure. This fails to uphold the GICOP obligation to treat customers fairly and to provide clear reasons for decisions. It can lead to customer dissatisfaction and potential breaches of the code. Another incorrect approach is to agree to the request without proper assessment or consideration of policy terms and GICOP obligations. This could lead to misinterpretation of policy coverage, financial risk for the insurer, and a failure to adhere to the GICOP requirement for claims to be assessed and settled in accordance with policy terms and conditions. A third incorrect approach is to delay a response indefinitely, hoping the customer will abandon the request. This directly contravenes the GICOP emphasis on timely communication and efficient claims handling. It demonstrates a lack of respect for the customer's time and can lead to frustration and a perception of poor service, violating the code's principles of good faith and fair dealing. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the customer's needs and concerns, while simultaneously ensuring adherence to regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. This involves 1. Active listening and understanding, fully comprehending the customer's request and the underlying reasons for it. 2. GICOP compliance check, identifying relevant GICOP clauses that apply to the situation, particularly those concerning fair treatment, communication, and claims handling. 3. Policy interpretation, reviewing the relevant policy terms and conditions to determine coverage and any limitations. 4. Investigation and consultation, if necessary, gathering further information or consulting with relevant internal departments to assess the feasibility and implications of the request. 5. Clear communication, providing the customer with a clear, timely, and reasoned response, explaining the decision and any next steps. 6. Documentation, maintaining thorough records of all communications and decisions. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates that a new type of travel insurance product, designed for adventure sports enthusiasts and sold exclusively through specialist adventure tour operators, has been launched. This product has unique policy wording and specific exclusion clauses related to high-risk activities. The insurer has not applied the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, to this product, believing its specialized nature and distribution channel place it outside the code's purview. Based on the GICOP 20-01, What is the most appropriate course of action for the insurer? Option A. Rely on the specialist tour operators to ensure compliance with consumer protection standards, as they are the direct point of sale. Option B. Immediately cease offering the product and conduct a full review to determine if it falls under the GICOP 20-01, applying the code retrospectively if necessary. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of the GICOP 20-01 scope and definitions to ascertain if this travel insurance product, sold to consumers for a general insurance purpose, is covered by the code, and apply it if it is. Option D. Continue to not apply the GICOP 20-01, as the product's specialized nature and distribution through tour operators indicate it is not intended for general consumers. The correct answer is B. Immediately cease offering the product and conduct a full review to determine if it falls under the GICOP 20-01, applying the code retrospectively if necessary. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurer to determine the applicability of the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, to a specific type of insurance product. Misinterpreting the scope of the code can lead to regulatory breaches, consumer detriment, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all obligations under the code are met for the relevant products and services. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the GICOP 20-01 definitions and scope provisions to ascertain whether the product in question falls within its purview. The GICOP 20-01 applies to general insurance products and services provided to consumers. If the product is a general insurance product offered to consumers, then the code's requirements regarding disclosure, claims handling, and fair treatment of customers will apply. This approach ensures compliance with the regulatory framework designed to protect consumers in the general insurance market. An incorrect approach would be to assume the code does not apply simply because the product is niche or has specific underwriting criteria. The GICOP 20-01 is broadly worded to encompass a wide range of general insurance products. Failing to apply the code to such a product would be a direct contravention of its scope and application provisions, potentially leading to a failure to provide adequate disclosure, unfair claims handling, and a breach of the duty to treat customers fairly, all of which are core tenets of the code. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on internal product classifications, without cross-referencing the code's explicit definitions. The code's definitions of consumer and general insurance product are paramount. If the product meets these definitions, regardless of internal categorization, the code applies. This failure to align internal processes with the code's regulatory intent is a significant ethical and regulatory lapse. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to exclude the product based on the fact that it is sold through a specialist broker. Assuming the broker's expertise negates the need for the insurer to adhere to the code. The GICOP 20-01 places obligations directly on the insurer, irrespective of the distribution channel. The insurer remains responsible for ensuring that its products and services, as delivered through any channel, comply with the code. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the product or service in question. 2. Consulting the GICOP 20-01, paying close attention to the definitions of consumer and general insurance product and the stated scope of application. 3. Comparing the characteristics of the product/service against these definitions. 4. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from legal or compliance departments. 5. Applying the code's requirements rigorously if the product/service falls within its scope. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for applying or not applying the code. Question 3. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a specific peril impacting the insured property. When discussing the policy renewal with a client, what is the most appropriate way to convey this information to ensure clarity and accuracy according to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Emphasize the extensive coverage provided by the policy, highlighting the financial protection it offers against unforeseen events, without delving into specific risk probabilities. Option B. Provide a detailed technical breakdown of the risk matrix and the statistical probability of the peril occurring, using industry-specific terminology. Option C. State that the policy is designed to protect against all potential risks and that the client can be assured of comprehensive cover for any eventuality. Option D. Explain that while the policy covers a broad range of events, there are specific exclusions that the client should be aware of, and then detail these exclusions in plain language, checking for understanding. The correct answer is D. Explain that while the policy covers a broad range of events, there are specific exclusions that the client should be aware of, and then detail these exclusions in plain language, checking for understanding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the insurance representative to balance the need to provide accurate information with the potential for that information to be misinterpreted or cause undue concern. The representative must ensure clarity and completeness without overwhelming the client or making definitive statements that could be misconstrued as guarantees. The core of the challenge lies in adhering to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, requirements for providing clear and accurate information, particularly concerning policy terms, conditions, and potential limitations. The correct approach involves clearly explaining the policy's coverage, including any exclusions or limitations, in a way that the client can easily understand. This means avoiding jargon, using plain language, and actively seeking confirmation that the client comprehends the information. This aligns with GICOP emphasis on providing information that is clear, accurate, and complete, and ensuring that consumers understand their insurance policies. It also reflects the ethical obligation to act in the client's best interest by ensuring informed decision-making. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on highlighting the positive aspects of the policy without adequately explaining limitations or exclusions would fail to meet the GICOP requirement for completeness and accuracy. This could lead to a misunderstanding of coverage and potential disappointment or dispute later. Similarly, an approach that uses overly technical language or assumes the client's prior knowledge of insurance terms would not be clear and understandable, violating the spirit and letter of the GICOP. Providing information that is technically correct but not easily comprehensible to the average consumer is a failure of the duty to provide clear information. Finally, an approach that avoids discussing potential limitations altogether to prevent client anxiety would be a direct contravention of the GICOP mandate for accuracy and completeness, as it would present an incomplete picture of the policy's scope. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes client understanding. This involves anticipating potential areas of confusion, tailoring communication to the client's level of understanding, and actively checking for comprehension. The GICOP serves as the primary guide, dictating the standards for information provision. Ethical considerations, such as acting in good faith and in the client's best interest, should also inform the approach, ensuring that information is not only accurate but also delivered in a manner that empowers the client. Question 4. Governance review demonstrates that a customer who appears to be elderly and speaks with a slight accent is requesting clarification on several clauses within a general insurance policy document. The customer states, "I'm not sure I fully grasp what this means for me." What is the most appropriate course of action for the insurance representative? Adhering strictly to the ANZIIF Foundation Certificate in Insurance General Insurance Code of Practice 2020. Option A. Briefly summarize the clauses and then ask if they have any further questions, assuming their initial request for clarification is sufficient. Option B. Proceed with the sale, assuming the customer understands the policy as they have not explicitly stated they cannot proceed. Option C. Offer to explain the policy clauses in simpler terms and ask open-ended questions to confirm the customer's understanding. Option D. Advise the customer that the policy document is standard, and they should seek legal advice if they have concerns. The correct answer is C. Offer to explain the policy clauses in simpler terms and ask open-ended questions to confirm the customer's understanding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the insurer's operational efficiency with the ethical and legal obligations to protect vulnerable customers. The General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, places a strong emphasis on fair treatment and clear communication, particularly when dealing with individuals who may be less able to understand complex information or advocate for themselves. The challenge lies in identifying vulnerability proactively and adapting communication and service delivery to meet these specific needs without compromising the integrity of the insurance process. The correct approach involves a proactive and empathetic response that prioritizes the customer's understanding and well-being. This aligns with the GICOP overarching principles of fairness, transparency, and providing assistance. Specifically, The GICOP requires insurers to take reasonable steps to ensure customers understand the terms and conditions of their insurance and to provide assistance where needed. By offering to explain the policy in simpler terms and confirming understanding, the insurer demonstrates a commitment to fulfilling these obligations. This approach respects the customer's right to informed consent and avoids potential misunderstandings that could lead to future disputes or financial hardship. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the sale without confirming understanding fails to meet the GICOP requirements for clear communication and fair treatment. This could lead to the customer purchasing a policy they do not fully comprehend, potentially leaving them underinsured or with unmet expectations. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming the customer understands due to their age or perceived education level, is discriminatory and ignores the possibility of diverse cognitive abilities and communication preferences. This also contravenes the GICOP emphasis on individualized assessment and support. Finally, an approach that dismisses the customer's request for clarification as an inconvenience risks alienating the customer and failing to uphold the insurer's duty of care. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential vulnerability. This involves active listening and observing for cues that suggest a customer may require additional support. Once potential vulnerability is identified, the next step is to adapt communication strategies to be clear, simple, and patient. This might involve using plain language, avoiding jargon, and offering to repeat or rephrase information. Crucially, it involves confirming understanding through open-ended questions rather than simple yes/no prompts. The insurer should then document the steps taken to assist the vulnerable customer, ensuring a record of their commitment to fair treatment and compliance with the GICOP. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that an insurance claims assessor is under pressure to meet internal targets for claims processing time. A policyholder has lodged a claim that requires detailed investigation, and a thorough assessment may exceed the assessor's usual processing timeframe. The assessor is considering expediting the decision to meet their targets, even if it means not fully exploring all avenues of the claim. Which approach best aligns with the key principles of the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Prioritize a comprehensive and fair investigation of the claim, even if it means exceeding internal processing time targets, ensuring clear communication with the policyholder throughout the process. Option B. Make a decision based on the most common outcomes for similar claims, without conducting a full investigation. To ensure timely resolution, Option C. Expedite the decision-making process to meet internal processing time targets, making a provisional assessment based on available information to avoid delays. Option D. Delay communication with the policyholder regarding the claim's progress until a definitive decision can be made, to avoid providing potentially incomplete information. Correct answer is A. Prioritize a comprehensive and fair investigation of the claim, even if it means exceeding internal processing time targets, ensuring clear communication with the policyholder throughout the process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurance claims assessor to balance the need for efficient claims processing with the fundamental obligation to act with honesty, fairness, and integrity towards the policyholder. The assessor must navigate potential conflicts between internal company targets and the insurer's duty of care as outlined in the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the claims assessment process, while aiming for expediency, does not compromise the policyholder's right to a fair and transparent resolution, particularly when dealing with a potentially complex or ambiguous claim. Careful judgment is required to avoid both undue delay and premature, potentially unfair, rejection or undervaluation of a claim. The correct approach involves thoroughly investigating the claim, gathering all necessary information, and communicating clearly and promptly with the policyholder, even if this means exceeding internal processing time targets. This aligns with GICOP Principle 1, act honestly, fairly, and with integrity. Specifically, it upholds the insurer's obligation to treat customers fairly and to provide clear, accurate, and timely information. By prioritizing a comprehensive and fair assessment over strict adherence to internal timelines, the assessor demonstrates a commitment to the spirit and letter of the code, ensuring the policyholder's interests are protected and that a just outcome is reached. An incorrect approach that prioritizes internal processing targets above all else leading to a hasty decision without full investigation, fails to uphold the principle of acting honestly, fairly, and with integrity. This could result in an unfair outcome for the policyholder, potentially breaching their rights under the code. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying communication with the policyholder without a valid reason, also violates the obligation to act with integrity and to provide timely information, causing unnecessary distress and uncertainty. A third incorrect approach, which involves making a decision based on incomplete information or assumptions that disadvantage the policyholder, directly contravenes the requirement for fairness and honesty in claims handling. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the GICOP overarching principles, particularly those relating to honesty, fairness, and integrity. When faced with a situation where internal pressures might conflict with these principles, the professional should ask, does this action uphold the policyholder's right to a fair and transparent claims process? The GICOP should be viewed as a guiding document that sets minimum standards of conduct, and professional judgment should always lean towards exceeding these standards to ensure customer trust and ethical practice. If internal targets hinder fair claims handling, the professional should escalate the issue internally, seeking guidance or advocating for a revised approach that prioritizes regulatory compliance and customer fairness. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that the insurer's current data handling practices for customer claims information may not fully align with the requirements of the Privacy Act 1988 (CTH). Specifically, there are concerns regarding the collection, use, and disclosure of sensitive personal information within the claims process. Which of the following is the most appropriate and compliant course of action to address these findings? Option A. Immediately update internal claims handling procedures to reflect a more cautious approach to data management without a formal assessment of the risks. Option B. Wait for a potential privacy breach to occur before seeking external legal advice on the insurer's data handling obligations. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment (PIA) to systematically identify, assess, and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the identified data handling practices. Option D. Classify the audit findings as minor operational issues and proceed with existing practices, assuming no significant privacy harm has occurred. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment (PIA) to systematically identify, assess, and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the identified data handling practices. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the insurer's operational needs with the stringent privacy obligations mandated by Australian privacy laws, specifically the Privacy Act 1988 (CTH) and the Australian Privacy Principles Act. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in data handling practices, which, if not addressed appropriately, could lead to breaches of privacy, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. The core challenge lies in determining the most effective and compliant method to rectify the identified issue without compromising customer trust or operational efficiency. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive privacy impact assessment (PIA). This is the most robust and proactive method because it systematically identifies and assesses the potential privacy risks associated with the identified data handling practice. A PIA allows the insurer to understand the scope of the issue, evaluate the necessity and proportionality of the data processing, and implement appropriate mitigation strategies before any actual harm occurs. This aligns directly with the principles of privacy by design and by default, as espoused by the APPs, particularly APP 1 Open and Transparent Management of Personal Information, and AP 11 Access to and Correction of Personal Information, and demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship. It also provides a documented record of due diligence, which is crucial for demonstrating compliance to regulators like the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, OIC. An incorrect approach would be to simply update internal procedures without a formal assessment. This fails to adequately identify the root causes of the privacy concern, or to evaluate the potential impact on individuals. Risks overlooking subtle but significant privacy risks, potentially leading to ongoing noncompliance and future breaches. This approach neglects the proactive risk management required by privacy legislation. Another incorrect approach would be to seek legal advice only after a breach has occurred. While legal advice is essential, waiting for a breach to occur is reactive rather than preventative. Privacy laws emphasize proactive compliance and risk mitigation. This approach misses the opportunity to prevent harm and may result in more significant legal and financial consequences due to the breach itself. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as minor operational issues without further investigation. This demonstrates a disregard for privacy obligations and a failure to appreciate the potential severity of privacy risks. It directly contravenes the spirit and letter of privacy legislation, which requires entities to take reasonable steps to protect personal information and comply with the APPs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging and taking seriously all audit findings, especially those related to data privacy. 2. Understanding the relevant legal and regulatory obligations, in this case, the Privacy Act 1988 and APPs. 3. Prioritizing a risk-based approach, focusing on potential harm to individuals. 4. Selecting the most appropriate method for assessing and mitigating identified risks, favoring proactive measures like PIAs. 5. Documenting all assessments and mitigation strategies to demonstrate compliance and accountability. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that a general insurer is reviewing its premium payment policies. The insurer currently only offers annual premium payments for all general insurance products, with no provision for installment plans. This approach is leading to a significant number of policy cancellations due to customers being unable to afford the lump sum payment at renewal. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020 (GICOP) regarding providing flexible payment options? Option A. Introduce a single alternative payment option, such as quarterly payments, but require policyholders to pay a substantial administrative fee for this service. Option B. Continue to offer only annual premium payments, but create a dedicated internal team to handle individual hardship applications for payment deferrals on a case-by-case basis. Option C. Maintain the current annual payment structure, but provide a brochure on financial planning resources that policyholders can consult independently. Option D. Proactively offer a range of flexible payment options, such as monthly or fortnightly installments, and clearly communicate these options to all policyholders, ensuring the terms are transparent and easily understood. The correct answer is D. Proactively offer a range of flexible payment options, such as monthly or fortnightly installments, and clearly communicate these options to all policyholders, ensuring the terms are transparent and easily understood. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge faced by general insurers, balancing the need for efficient premium collection with the ethical and regulatory obligation to provide accessible payment options to policyholders. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurer to consider the diverse financial circumstances of its customers while adhering to the principles of fairness and accessibility enshrined in the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020 (GICOP). Failing to offer flexible payment options can disproportionately impact vulnerable customers, potentially leading to policy lapses and financial hardship, which is contrary to the spirit and letter of the GICOP. Careful judgment is required to implement policies that are both commercially viable and socially responsible. The correct approach involves proactively offering a range of flexible payment options, such as fortnightly or monthly installments, in addition to annual payments, and clearly communicating these options to policyholders. This aligns directly with the GICOP emphasis on treating customers fairly and ensuring that insurance is accessible. Specifically, Principle 1 of the GICOP, which relates to acting with honesty, fairness, and competence, and Principle 7, which focuses on providing clear and accessible information, are directly supported by offering flexible payment methods. This approach demonstrates a commitment to customer service and financial inclusion, fostering trust and long-term relationships. An incorrect approach would be to only offer annual payment options and require policyholders to specifically request alternative arrangements, or to impose significant administrative fees for any deviation from annual payments. This fails to meet the GICOP expectation of proactive customer support and accessibility. Such a stance could be seen as a breach of Principle 7 by not providing clear and accessible information about payment flexibility, and potentially contravening Principle 1 by not acting fairly towards customers who may struggle with a single annual payment. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a limited range of payment options without clearly explaining the terms and conditions associated with each, or to make the process of setting up alternative payments overly complex and burdensome. This would also fall short of the GICOP requirements for transparency and ease of access, potentially leading to customer dissatisfaction and a perception of unfair treatment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes customer well-being and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the regulatory requirements and ethical considerations relevant to the situation, e.g., GICOP principles on fairness and accessibility. 2. Assessing the diverse needs and circumstances of the customer base. 3. Evaluating potential solutions against these requirements and needs, considering both commercial feasibility and customer impact. 4. Selecting the option that best upholds regulatory obligations and ethical standards, ensuring clear communication and support for the customer. Question 8. Quality control measures reveal that a significant number of policyholders have not accessed or acknowledged key policy renewal documents, leading to potential misunderstandings about coverage. The insurer needs to implement a strategy to improve communication effectiveness for these policyholders. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, for ensuring policyholder understanding? Option A. Implement a new digital portal for all policyholders and assume they will all have the necessary digital literacy and access to use it for all communications. Option B. Continue to send all policy documents in the standard format and wait for policyholders to contact the insurer if they have difficulty understanding the information. Option C. Offer alternative communication formats only when a policyholder explicitly requests them, without any proactive outreach or promotion of these options. Option D. Proactively identify policyholders who may benefit from alternative communication formats and offer them options such as large print, audio, or accessible digital versions, ensuring these formats are genuinely usable and understandable. The correct answer is D. Proactively identify policyholders who may benefit from alternative communication formats and offer them options such as large print, audio, or accessible digital versions, ensuring these formats are genuinely usable and understandable. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurer to balance the need for efficient communication with the fundamental obligation to ensure all policyholders, regardless of their communication preferences or accessibility needs, can access and understand crucial information. The challenge lies in implementing alternative communication methods that are not only practical for the insurer, but also genuinely effective and compliant with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01. Failure to do so can lead to misunderstandings, disputes, and a breach of regulatory obligations, potentially impacting customer trust and satisfaction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively identifying policyholders who may benefit from alternative communication methods and offering them options that are accessible and understandable. This aligns with the GICOP 20-01 emphasis on clear, accessible communication and the insurer's responsibility to ensure policyholders are adequately informed. Specifically, the code requires insurers to take reasonable steps to ensure policyholders understand the terms, conditions, and limitations of their insurance policies. Offering a range of accessible formats, such as large print, audio, or digital versions with screen reader compatibility, demonstrates a commitment to this principle. It also reflects an ethical obligation to treat customers fairly and inclusively, ensuring that no policyholder is disadvantaged due to their communication needs. Incorrect approach is analysis. Relying solely on standard communication methods and assuming all policyholders can access and understand them is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach neglects the GICOP 20-01 requirement to take reasonable steps to ensure understanding and fails to accommodate diverse needs, potentially disadvantaging vulnerable customers. Offering alternative communication methods only when explicitly requested by a policyholder, without any proactive identification or promotion, is also insufficient. While it addresses direct requests, it fails to meet the insurer's obligation to actively ensure understanding and may leave many policyholders unaware of available options or unable to articulate their needs effectively. This passive approach can lead to a significant gap in communication accessibility. Implementing alternative communication methods that are not genuinely accessible or understandable to the intended recipients, even if offered, constitutes a failure. For example, providing a digital format that is not compatible with screen readers for a visually impaired policyholder would not meet the spirit or letter of the code. The effectiveness of the alternative method is paramount. Simply offering a format is not enough if it does not facilitate comprehension. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and inclusive approach to communication. This involves understanding the principles of the GICOP 20-01, particularly those relating to clear communication and customer fairness. A robust process should include 1. Identifying potential communication needs through customer data or general awareness campaigns. 2. Offering a clear and accessible range of communication options. 3. Ensuring that offered alternative methods are genuinely accessible and understandable. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating communication strategies to align with best practices and regulatory expectations. This systematic approach ensures compliance, fosters customer trust, and upholds ethical standards in insurance practice. Question 9. What factors determine an insurer's effective commitment to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, beyond mere compliance with its explicit clauses? Option A. The insurers focus on meeting only the minimum legal obligations stipulated by general insurance legislation, viewing the GICOP as a supplementary guideline. Option B. The insurer's ability to minimize operational costs by streamlining customer service and claims handling procedures, regardless of the impact on customer experience. Option C. The extent to which the insurer proactively embeds the code's principles into its internal culture, training, and operational processes to foster customer trust and fair dealing. Option D. The insurer's engagement in industry-wide lobbying efforts to influence the future direction of the GICOP, prioritizing commercial interests over customer protection. The correct answer is C. The extent to which the insurer proactively embeds the code's principles into its internal culture, training, and operational processes to foster customer trust and fair dealing. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an insurer in balancing its commercial interests with its commitment to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP. The GICOP outlines industry-wide commitments to customers, and adherence to its principles is crucial for maintaining public trust and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the code's provisions in a way that is both commercially viable and ethically sound, particularly when faced with situations that might strain resources or challenge established practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the insurer's actions do not inadvertently breach the spirit or letter of the code, even if not explicitly prohibited. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the GICOP intent and specific clauses related to industry commitment. This means proactively identifying potential conflicts between business objectives and customer welfare as defined by the code, and implementing internal processes and training to ensure staff are aware of and adhere to these commitments. It requires a culture that prioritizes customer fairness and transparency, and a willingness to adapt practices to align with the code's evolving expectations. This approach is justified by the GICOP itself, which mandates that signatories commit to its principles and uphold high standards of conduct. Specifically, Clause 1. 2 of the GICOP states that signatories commit to the code and will take all reasonable steps to ensure compliance. This implies a proactive and ongoing effort to embed the code's principles into the insurer's operations. An incorrect approach would be to interpret the GICOP solely as a set of minimum legal requirements, focusing only on avoiding explicit breaches without considering the underlying ethical obligations. This fails to recognize the code's purpose as a voluntary industry standard designed to enhance customer trust and satisfaction beyond mere legal compliance. Such an approach risks alienating customers and potentially facing reputational damage or regulatory scrutiny for conduct that, while not strictly illegal, falls short of the code's expected standards. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate cost savings or operational efficiencies over the commitments outlined in the GICOP. For example, reducing customer service resources or streamlining claims processes in a way that negatively impacts the customer experience, even if it improves the insurer's bottom line, would likely contravene the spirit of the code. This approach fails to acknowledge that the GICOP is designed to foster long-term customer relationships built on trust and fair dealing, which can be undermined by short-sighted cost-cutting measures. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that the GICOP only applies to direct customer interactions, neglecting its broader implications for industry-wide commitments. The code's principles extend to how an insurer conducts its business overall, including its relationships with other industry participants and its contribution to the reputation of the general insurance industry. Ignoring these broader commitments would be a failure to uphold the holistic intent of the GICOP. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a continuous cycle of understanding, implementation, and review. Professionals must first gain a comprehensive understanding of the GICOP requirements and their implications for their specific role and the insurer's operations. This understanding should then be translated into practical policies, procedures, and training programs. Regular reviews and audits are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and to identify any areas where practices may be diverging from the code's principles. When faced with a potential conflict, professionals should consult relevant internal policies, seek guidance from compliance or legal departments, and always err on the side of customer fairness and transparency, aligning their actions with the overarching commitment to the GICOP. Question 10. Examination of the data shows that a sales representative is discussing a comprehensive home insurance policy with a potential customer. The policy has a standard excess amount for most claims, but a significantly higher excess for claims related to flood damage, a risk that is present in the customer's area. The representative is concerned that highlighting the higher flood excess might deter the customer from purchasing the policy, as they have expressed concerns about flood risk. What is the most ethical and compliant approach for the sales representative? Option A. Provide a summary of the policy's benefits and the standard excess, omitting any mention of the higher flood excess to avoid confusing the customer. Option B. Focus on the comprehensive nature of the policy and the benefits it offers, only mentioning the higher flood excess if the customer specifically asks about flood-related claims. Option C. Clearly and proactively explain the standard excess and the significantly higher excess for flood damage, ensuring the customer understands the implications for their specific risk profile. Option D. Downplay the significance of the higher flood excess, stating that flood claims are rare and the higher excess is unlikely to be a major concern for most policyholders. The correct answer is C. Clearly and proactively explain the standard excess and the significantly higher excess for flood damage, ensuring the customer understands the implications for their specific risk profile. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the insurer's commercial interests with the ethical obligation to provide clear, accurate, and fair information to potential customers. The temptation to downplay or omit potentially negative information to secure a sale is a common ethical pitfall in sales practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all disclosures are made in accordance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, and broader ethical principles of transparency and honesty. The correct approach involves proactively and clearly disclosing all relevant information about the policy, including limitations and exclusions, even if it might deter the sale. This aligns directly with the GICOP 20-01 emphasis on fair dealing and providing clear, accurate, and complete information to customers. Specifically, Principle 1 of the GICOP 20-01 mandates that insurers must deal with customers honestly and fairly. This includes ensuring that sales representatives provide information that is not misleading and that customers understand the products they are purchasing. By fully disclosing the limitations, the representative upholds the spirit and letter of the code, fostering trust and preventing future disputes or complaints. An incorrect approach that involves omitting or downplaying the limitations of the policy to secure the sale fails to meet the GICOP 20-01 requirements for fair dealing and transparency. This misrepresentation, even if unintentional, can lead to a customer purchasing a policy that does not meet their needs or expectations, resulting in a breach of Principle 1. Another incorrect approach, which is to only provide details when specifically asked, also falls short. The code implies a proactive duty to inform, not a passive one to answer only direct questions. This can leave customers unaware of crucial policy terms they might not think to ask about. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the benefits without mentioning any potential drawbacks is misleading and unethical, directly contravening the obligation to provide complete information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes customer understanding and regulatory compliance. This involves a commitment to transparency, a thorough understanding of the GICOP 20-01 requirements, and a willingness to have potentially difficult conversations with customers about policy limitations. The guiding principle should be, would a reasonable customer, fully informed of all material facts, understand this policy and its limitations? If the answer is uncertain, further clarification and disclosure are necessary. Question 11. When evaluating a general insurance claim where the claimant has expressed ongoing dissatisfaction with the proposed settlement and has indicated a desire to pursue the matter further, what is the most appropriate action for the claims assessor to take in accordance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Advise the claimant that they have the right to access an external dispute resolution scheme if they remain dissatisfied after the internal dispute resolution process has been completed. Option B. Close the claim file immediately as the claimant is clearly unhappy with the proposed settlement. Option C. Inform the claimant that the insurer's internal dispute resolution process is final and that no further recourse is available. Option D. Suggest that the claimant seek independent legal advice before any further discussion about the claim settlement. The correct answer is A. Advise the claimant that they have the right to access an external dispute resolution scheme if they remain dissatisfied after the internal dispute resolution process has been completed. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurance claims assessor to balance the insurer's obligations under the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, with the claimant's right to access external dispute resolution (EDR) when dissatisfied with a claim outcome. The assessor must understand the limitations and scope of their internal dispute resolution process and recognize when escalation to an external scheme is appropriate and in line with GICOP principles. The correct approach involves clearly informing the claimant about their right to access an external dispute resolution scheme if they remain dissatisfied after the internal dispute resolution process has been exhausted. This aligns with GICOP Principle 9, which mandates that insurers must provide clear and accessible information about complaint handling and dispute resolution processes, including details of external dispute resolution schemes. It upholds the spirit of fairness and transparency by empowering the claimant with knowledge of their further recourse. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the claimant's request for escalation without a thorough review of their dissatisfaction, potentially leading to a breach of GICOP Principle 9 by failing to provide adequate information or access to dispute resolution. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest that the internal dispute resolution process is the only avenue for resolution, thereby misleading the claimant about their rights and potentially contravening GICOP commitment to fair complaint handling. Finally, advising the claimant to seek legal advice before considering an EDR scheme, without first outlining the EDR options available, could be seen as an unnecessary barrier and a failure to provide clear, accessible information as required by the GICOP. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear communication, adherence to the GICOP, and empowering the customer. This involves understanding the claimant's concerns, explaining the internal dispute resolution process and its limitations, and then clearly outlining the availability and process for accessing an external dispute resolution scheme if dissatisfaction persists. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a streamlined, automated initial assessment for all incoming complaints, without requiring a full investigation by a senior staff member for every case, could significantly reduce processing times and operational costs. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020 requirements for internal complaints handling? Option A. Introduce the streamlined, automated initial assessment for all complaints and train frontline staff to handle any follow-up queries, with the understanding that a full investigation is only initiated if the complaint remains unresolved after 2 rounds of frontline staff interaction. Option B. Adopt the streamlined, automated initial assessment for all complaints and rely on the system's algorithms to determine the final outcome, with a general policy of offering a goodwill gesture to any policyholder who expresses dissatisfaction with the automated decision, rather than conducting a detailed review. Option C. Proceed with the streamlined, automated initial assessment for all complaints, with the aim of resolving the majority quickly, and only escalate to a full investigation if the policyholder explicitly requests it after receiving the initial automated outcome. Option D. Implement the streamlined, automated initial assessment, provided that a senior staff member reviews a statistically significant sample of these assessments to ensure accuracy and compliance with the GICOP, and that the system flags complex or sensitive complaints for immediate full investigation by experienced personnel. The correct answer is D. Implement the streamlined, automated initial assessment, provided that a senior staff member reviews a statistically significant sample of these assessments to ensure accuracy and compliance with the GICOP, and that the system flags complex or sensitive complaints for immediate full investigation by experienced personnel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the insurer's operational efficiency with the fundamental rights of a policyholder to a fair and timely complaint resolution. The insurer must implement a complaints handling process that is not only cost-effective, but also demonstrably compliant with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP. The challenge lies in ensuring that cost-saving measures do not compromise the integrity, fairness, or timeliness of the internal complaint resolution process, which is a core obligation under the GICOP. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement processes that meet both business objectives and regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves establishing clear internal procedures for acknowledging, investigating, and resolving complaints within the timeframe stipulated by the GICOP. This includes ensuring that all staff involved in complaint handling are adequately trained on the GICOP requirements and the insurer's internal procedures. The insurer must also maintain a robust system for recording and tracking complaints, allowing for effective oversight and reporting. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the GICOP emphasis on fair, efficient, and transparent complaint handling. Specifically, Clause 9 of the GICOP mandates that insurers have a clear, accessible, and effective internal dispute resolution (IDR) process. This includes acknowledging complaints promptly, investigating them thoroughly, and providing a written response within the specified timeframes, typically 30 days for standard complaints, with provisions for extensions where justified and communicated. Adhering to these procedural requirements ensures that policyholders are treated fairly and that their grievances are addressed systematically, fostering trust and upholding the insurer's reputation. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that prioritizes speed of resolution over thorough investigation by making a preliminary decision based on limited information to meet internal targets, fails to comply with the GICOP. This is because Clause 9.3 requires a thorough investigation of all relevant facts and circumstances before a decision is made. Rushing to a conclusion without adequate investigation can lead to unfair outcomes for the policyholder and breaches the spirit and letter of the code. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate complaint investigation and resolution to staff who have not received specific training on the GICOP or the insurer's IDR procedures. This is a regulatory failure because Clause 9.2 of the GICOP requires that staff involved in complaint handling are competent and adequately trained. Inadequate training can lead to inconsistent application of procedures, misunderstandings of policy terms, and ultimately, unfair complaint outcomes, thereby failing to provide an effective IDR process. Finally, an approach that does not maintain a comprehensive record of all complaints, including the steps taken to resolve them and the final outcome, is also non-compliant. Clause 9.6 requires insurers to maintain records of complaints. This is essential for monitoring the effectiveness of the IDR process, identifying systemic issues, and demonstrating compliance to regulators. Without proper record keeping, the insurer cannot effectively manage its complaint handling obligations or provide evidence of compliance if required. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach complaint handling by first understanding the regulatory obligations under the GICOP, particularly Clause 9 concerning internal dispute resolution. This involves recognizing that while efficiency is desirable, it must not come at the expense of fairness and thoroughness. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the complaint, ensuring the complaint is fully understood and all relevant information is gathered. 2. Investigating thoroughly, conducting a comprehensive investigation that considers all facts, policy terms, and relevant circumstances. 3. Applying procedures consistently, following established internal procedures that are aligned with GICOP requirements. 4. Communicating clearly, providing clear, timely, and reasoned responses to the policyholder. 5. Maintaining records, ensuring all actions and outcomes are accurately documented. 6. Continuous improvement, regularly reviewing the complaint handling process to identify areas for improvement and ensure ongoing compliance. This structured approach ensures that both the policyholder's rights and the insurer's regulatory obligations are met, fostering a fair and effective dispute resolution environment. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that insurance professionals often face situations where customer queries extend beyond their immediate expertise. In such a scenario, an insurance professional receives a complex inquiry regarding a niche policy exclusion that they are not entirely familiar with. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the competency standards outlined in the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01? Option A. State that you cannot answer the question and leave the customer without further assistance or a timeline for a response. Option B. Acknowledge the complexity of the query and inform the customer that you will consult with a senior colleague or subject matter expert to ensure accurate advice before responding. Option C. Immediately provide an answer based on a general understanding of policy exclusions, hoping it is correct. Option D. Provide a detailed, technical explanation of policy exclusions in general, without specifically addressing the customer's unique query. The correct answer is C. Immediately provide an answer based on a general understanding of policy exclusions, hoping it is correct. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurance professional to balance the immediate need to resolve a customer's query with the overarching obligation to maintain professional competence and uphold the integrity of the insurance industry. The pressure to provide a quick answer can lead to shortcuts that compromise the quality of advice and potentially mislead the customer. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions are grounded in a thorough understanding of relevant insurance principles and practices, as mandated by the GICOP 20-01. The correct approach involves acknowledging the limits of one's knowledge and seeking assistance from a more experienced colleague or supervisor. This demonstrates a commitment to professional development and adherence to competency standards. Specifically, the GICOP 20-01, in its spirit and intent regarding professional conduct, implicitly requires individuals to operate within their demonstrated capabilities. By seeking guidance, the professional ensures that the customer receives accurate and appropriate advice, thereby upholding the GICOP 20-01 emphasis on fair treatment and responsible conduct. This proactive step prevents potential misinterpretations or incorrect advice that could lead to customer dissatisfaction and reputational damage for both the individual and the insurer. An incorrect approach would be to guess or provide a superficial answer based on incomplete knowledge. This fails to meet the competency standards expected of insurance professionals under the GICOP 20-01. Providing inaccurate information, even with good intentions, can lead to detrimental outcomes for the customer and breaches the principle of acting with due skill, care, and diligence. Another incorrect approach would be to defer the question indefinitely without any commitment to finding an answer. This demonstrates a lack of initiative and a failure to address customer needs promptly and effectively, which is contrary to the customer-centric principles embedded within the GICOP 20-01. Finally, providing an answer that is technically correct but overly complex and difficult for the customer to understand, without attempting to simplify it, also falls short. While not factually incorrect, it fails to communicate effectively, hindering the customer's ability to make informed decisions, which is a key aspect of responsible advice under the code. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a self-assessment of knowledge and expertise regarding the specific query. If there is any doubt or lack of certainty, the immediate next step should be to consult relevant resources, policies, or more experienced colleagues. The priority is always to provide accurate, clear, and appropriate advice, even if it means a slight delay. This proactive approach to knowledge gaps is fundamental to maintaining professional competence and fulfilling the obligations outlined in the GICOP 20-01. Question 14. Regulatory review indicates that an insurer's internal dispute resolution process has failed to satisfy a customer regarding their claim. The customer has expressed continued dissatisfaction with the proposed resolution. Which of the following actions best aligns with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, regarding external dispute resolution EDR options. Option A. Suggest to the customer that FCA is an option only if the insurer believes the complaint warrants further independent review. Option B. Provide the customer with a general statement about the availability of external dispute resolution without specifying FCA or its contact information. Option C. Advise the customer that they must continue to engage with the internal dispute resolution team until all possible internal avenues are exhausted, regardless of their satisfaction. Option D. Inform the customer that they have the right to refer their complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA, and provide them with FCA contact details. The correct answer is D. Inform the customer that they have the right to refer their complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA, and provide them with FCA contact details. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurance provider to navigate a customer's dissatisfaction while adhering strictly to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01. The core challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient internal complaint resolution with the customer's right to access external dispute resolution (EDR) mechanisms, ensuring transparency and fairness throughout the process. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could be perceived as delaying or obstructing the customer's access to their rights under the code. The correct approach involves clearly and promptly informing the customer about their EDR options, specifically mentioning the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA, as the designated external dispute resolution scheme. This aligns with the GICOP 20-01 emphasis on providing clear, accessible, and timely information to consumers regarding their complaint rights. The code mandates that insurers must inform complainants of their right to refer the complaint to an external dispute resolution scheme if the internal dispute resolution process does not resolve the complaint to their satisfaction. Providing this information proactively and without undue delay is a fundamental ethical and regulatory obligation. An incorrect approach would be to suggest that the customer must exhaust all internal avenues before being informed of EDR options. This fails to acknowledge the customer's right to escalate their complaint to FCA once the internal process has not led to a satisfactory resolution, potentially delaying their access to an independent review. Another incorrect approach would be to provide vague or incomplete information about EDR, such as only mentioning external dispute resolution without specifying the relevant scheme, FCA. This lack of specificity can confuse the customer and hinder their ability to exercise their rights effectively, contravening the code's requirement for clear communication. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to imply that the insurer has discretion over whether to inform the customer about FCA, or to suggest that FCA is only an option if the insurer deems it appropriate. This misunderstands the customer's entitlement to access EDR as a right, not a privilege granted by the insurer. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes customer rights and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the GICOP 20-01 thoroughly, particularly the sections pertaining to complaint handling and EDR. When a customer expresses dissatisfaction that cannot be immediately resolved internally, the professional should proactively consult the code to ensure all required information regarding EDR is provided accurately and promptly. This includes identifying the correct EDR scheme and clearly communicating the process for accessing it. A customer-centric approach, coupled with a commitment to transparency and adherence to the GICOP 20-01, forms the basis of sound professional judgment in such situations. Question 15. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in the number of complex complaints that are not resolved by the initial customer service team within the first contact. A specific complaint involves a policy interpretation dispute that has been raised by a long-standing customer who has expressed significant dissatisfaction with the initial assessment. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take in accordance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Immediately escalate the complaint to the Internal Dispute Resolution (IDR) team for expert review and resolution. Option B. Place the complaint on hold pending further internal review by the underwriting department. Option C. Reassign the complaint to a senior customer service representative with more experience. Option D. Advise the customer that the company cannot resolve the issue and suggest they seek external legal advice. The correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the complaint to the Internal Dispute Resolution (IDR) team for expert review and resolution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurance company to navigate the complexities of a complaint that has escalated beyond the initial customer service team. The challenge lies in ensuring that the escalation process is not only efficient, but also adheres strictly to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01. A failure to follow the prescribed escalation procedures can lead to customer dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and potential breaches of the code. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for timely resolution with the imperative to uphold the principles of fairness and transparency outlined in the GICOP. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the complaint to the designated Internal Dispute Resolution (IDR) team, as mandated by the GICOP. This team is specifically equipped and trained to handle complex complaints that cannot be resolved at the first point of contact. The GICOP, in its emphasis on effective complaint handling, requires insurers to have clear and accessible escalation pathways. By escalating to the IDR team, the insurer demonstrates a commitment to the code's principles of providing a fair and timely resolution process, ensuring the customer's concerns are addressed by individuals with the appropriate authority and expertise. This proactive step aligns with the code's objective of fostering trust and confidence in the general insurance industry. An incorrect approach would be to simply reassign the complaint to a different customer service representative without involving the IDR team. This fails to acknowledge the complexity of the issue and bypasses the established escalation protocol. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach is deficient because it does not guarantee that the complaint will be handled by personnel with the necessary skills or authority to resolve it, potentially leading to further delays and frustration for the customer, and a breach of the GICOP requirement for effective complaint resolution. Another incorrect approach would be to inform the customer that the company cannot resolve the issue and suggest they seek external advice. This is a significant failure to meet the obligations under the GICOP. The code requires insurers to have robust internal complaint handling mechanisms, including an IDR process. Abandoning the customer and pushing them towards external avenues without exhausting internal resolution options is a direct contravention of the spirit and letter of the GICOP, which aims to provide a structured and supportive internal resolution process. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the escalation, hoping the customer will withdraw their complaint. This is not only unethical, but also a clear breach of the GICOP. The code mandates timely handling of complaints. Procrastination and avoidance are unacceptable practices that undermine the integrity of the complaint resolution process and demonstrate a lack of commitment to customer service and regulatory compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the GICOP requirements for complaint handling and escalation. When a complaint exhibits complexity or has been escalated by the customer, the immediate step should be to identify the appropriate internal escalation point, typically the IDR team. This involves recognizing the limitations of initial customer service and understanding the mandate for specialized handling of more intricate issues. Professionals should be trained to identify triggers for escalation and to follow the established procedures without deviation. The focus should always be on providing a fair, transparent, and timely resolution in line with the regulatory framework. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates that customers are experiencing frustration with the current complaint resolution process, suggesting a potential deficiency in staff training. Considering the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, which of the following approaches to enhancing staff training on complaints handling would best align with the code's principles of fairness, integrity, and customer focus? Option A. Conduct a single, brief online training module that outlines the basic steps for logging a complaint and directing it to the appropriate department. Option B. Rely on experienced staff members to informally mentor newer colleagues on how to handle customer complaints as they arise. Option C. Implement a comprehensive training program that includes detailed GICOP complaint handling procedures, role-playing exercises for common complaint scenarios, and modules on active listening and de-escalation techniques. Option D. Provide staff with access to the GICOP document and expect them to familiarize themselves with its contents independently. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive training program that includes detailed GICOP complaint handling procedures, role-playing exercises for common complaint scenarios, and modules on active listening and de-escalation techniques. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurer to actively address a gap in their customer service delivery identified through direct stakeholder feedback. The General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP, places a strong emphasis on insurers acting with integrity and in a manner that is fair and transparent, particularly in how they handle customer complaints. Effective training on complaints handling is not merely a procedural step, but a fundamental requirement for meeting these obligations. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate and effective training method that aligns with the GICOP principles and ensures staff are equipped to handle complaints competently and empathetically. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted training program that combines theoretical knowledge with practical application. This includes understanding the GICOP-specific requirements for complaints handling, developing strong communication and active listening skills, and practicing scenario-based problem-solving. Such an approach ensures staff not only know the rules but can also apply them effectively in real-world situations, fostering customer trust and demonstrating the insurer's commitment to fair treatment. This aligns directly with GICOP objectives of promoting good conduct and ensuring consumers are treated fairly. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on a brief online module without practical elements fails to adequately equip staff. This is a regulatory failure because it does not ensure staff possess the necessary skills to handle complaints effectively, potentially leading to breaches of GICOP requirements regarding timely and fair resolution. Another incorrect approach, which relies on experienced staff to informally mentor newer colleagues, is also problematic. While informal learning has its place, it lacks the structured, consistent, and documented approach required by GICOP to ensure all staff receive standardized, high-quality training. This can lead to inconsistencies in complaint handling and a failure to meet the code's expectations for a robust complaints process. A third incorrect approach, which only covers the basic steps of logging a complaint without addressing the underlying principles of empathy, de-escalation, and resolution, is insufficient. This approach neglects the crucial soft skills and problem-solving aspects of complaint resolution, which are vital for customer satisfaction and for meeting the spirit of the GICOP. Professionals should approach this situation by first acknowledging the feedback as a critical indicator of service quality. They should then consult the relevant sections of the GICOP pertaining to complaints handling and customer service standards. The next step is to design a training program that directly addresses the identified gaps, prioritizing methods that promote skill development and practical application. This involves evaluating different training modalities against the GICOP requirements for competence, fairness, and transparency. Finally, a robust evaluation mechanism should be implemented to assess the effectiveness of the training and ensure ongoing compliance. Question 17. Process analysis reveals that during a general insurance claim assessment, a customer expresses significant financial distress, stating they are struggling to pay bills and cannot immediately gather the requested supporting documents due to their circumstances. The claims handler notes the customer's emotional tone and their difficulty in providing the necessary information. What is the most appropriate course of action for the claims handler, in accordance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Immediately escalate the claim for expedited processing, assuming the financial distress is the sole reason for the documentation delay. Option B. Inform the customer about the availability of independent financial counseling services and offer to provide contact details, while also discussing potential options for managing the claim process given their situation. Option C. Suggest the customer seek advice from their bank on how to manage their finances during the claim process. Option D. Advise the customer that the claim cannot proceed without the required documentation and suggest they resubmit once they are able to provide it. Correct answer is D. Advise the customer that the claim cannot proceed without the required documentation and suggest they resubmit once they are able to provide it. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an insurance claims handler to balance the immediate need to process a claim with the ethical and regulatory obligation to identify and address potential customer vulnerability. The customer's expressed financial distress, coupled with their inability to provide requested documentation, signals a potential need for support beyond standard claims processing. Failing to recognize and act upon this vulnerability could lead to detrimental outcomes for the customer and breaches of the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP. The correct approach involves recognizing the customer's distress and proactively offering assistance by referring them to financial counseling services. This aligns with the GICOP overarching principles of treating customers fairly and with empathy, particularly those in vulnerable circumstances. Specifically, the GICOP emphasizes the importance of identifying and responding to customer vulnerability. By offering a referral, the claims handler demonstrates a commitment to supporting the customer through a difficult period, acknowledging that financial hardship can impede their ability to meet claim requirements and potentially exacerbate their situation. This proactive step upholds the insurer's duty of care and fosters trust. An incorrect approach would be to simply deny the claim due to the lack of documentation without further investigation or support. This fails to acknowledge the customer's expressed financial difficulties and the potential impact on their ability to comply with requirements. It also overlooks the GICOP expectation that insurers will take reasonable steps to assist customers who are experiencing vulnerability. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the claim without addressing the financial distress, potentially leading to a claim outcome that further disadvantages the customer or to a delayed resolution due to their ongoing financial struggles. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to adhere to the spirit of fair treatment. A further incorrect approach would be to advise the customer to seek financial advice from a specific, non-independent source, which could create a conflict of interest and may not provide the impartial support the customer requires. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes customer well-being and regulatory compliance. This involves actively listening to customers, identifying indicators of vulnerability, and understanding the relevant provisions of the GICOP. When vulnerability is suspected, the professional should pause standard processing to explore appropriate support mechanisms, such as referring to independent financial counseling services, before proceeding with the claim. This ensures that decisions are made with full consideration of the customer's circumstances and in accordance with ethical and regulatory obligations. Question 18. Research into the consequences of non-disclosure in a general insurance policy has revealed a situation where a policyholder failed to disclose a minor previous claim that occurred 5 years prior to the current application. The insurer discovers this non-disclosure when a new, unrelated claim is lodged. What is the most appropriate course of action for the insurer to take in accordance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation to determine the materiality of the previous claim to the current policy's underwriting and risk assessment. Option B. Immediately avoid the policy and reject the current claim, citing the non-disclosure. Option C. Contact the policyholder and request an increased premium for the current policy to account for the undisclosed risk. Option D. Offer a significantly reduced settlement for the current claim as a penalty for the non-disclosure. The correct answer is B. Immediately avoid the policy and reject the current claim, citing the non-disclosure. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the insurer to balance their right to avoid a policy due to non-disclosure with their obligation to act fairly and reasonably towards the policyholder, particularly when the non-disclosure may have been innocent or unintentional. The insurer must carefully consider the materiality of the undisclosed information and whether it would have influenced their decision to offer cover or the terms and premium charged. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the circumstances of the non-disclosure. This includes assessing whether the policyholder deliberately concealed information or if it was an oversight. If the non-disclosure was innocent and the undisclosed information, even if known, would not have materially altered the insurer's decision to provide cover on the same terms, then avoiding the policy would be an unfair and unreasonable outcome. The insurer should proceed with the claim, potentially adjusting the settlement based on the actual risk, rather than outright avoidance. This aligns with the principles of good faith and fair dealing expected under the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01, which emphasizes that insurers should not unfairly deny claims. An incorrect approach would be to automatically avoid the policy upon discovery of any non-disclosure, regardless of its materiality or the policyholder's intent. This fails to uphold the duty of good faith and fair dealing, as it presumes fault and penalizes the policyholder without proper consideration. Such an approach could be seen as a breach of GICOP 20-01 commitment to fair treatment of customers. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a significantly reduced settlement without a clear and justifiable basis directly linked to the materiality of the undisclosed information. While adjustments may be warranted if the non-disclosure increased the risk, a substantial reduction without a demonstrable link to the insurer's underwriting decision or the claim outcome would be arbitrary and unfair, contravening the spirit of GICOP 20-01. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the policy application, the undisclosed information, and the circumstances of the claim. Insurers should apply a materiality test. Would the undisclosed information have influenced the underwriting decision, acceptance, terms, premium? If not, avoidance is likely inappropriate. If it would have influenced the decision, the insurer must then consider the degree of influence and whether avoidance is a proportionate response, or if a claim adjustment is more appropriate. This process requires careful judgment, adherence to the GICOP 20-01, and a commitment to fair and transparent communication with the policyholder. Question 19. To address the challenge of a general insurance customer who remains dissatisfied after the internal dispute resolution process has concluded, and who has expressed frustration with the insurer's final decision, what is the most appropriate action for the insurance professional to take to ensure compliance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01? Option A. Inform the customer that FCA cannot assist them if the insurer believes its decision is final and legally sound. Option B. Delay informing the customer about FCA until further internal reviews are completed to see if the decision can be overturned. Option C. Clearly and promptly advise the customer of their right to escalate the complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA, if they remain dissatisfied. Option D. Advise the customer that their only recourse is to seek independent legal advice before any further action can be considered. The correct answer is C. Clearly and promptly advise the customer of their right to escalate the complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA, if they remain dissatisfied. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an insurance professional to navigate a complex situation involving a dissatisfied customer and a potential dispute, while adhering strictly to the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020, GICOP 20-01. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the insurer's obligations and the customer's rights when a complaint cannot be resolved internally, particularly concerning the escalation pathway to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, FCA. Careful judgment is required to ensure the customer is treated fairly and is fully informed of their options, thereby avoiding reputational damage and potential regulatory breaches. The correct approach involves clearly and promptly advising the customer of their right to escalate the complaint to FCA if they remain dissatisfied after the internal dispute resolution process has been exhausted. This aligns directly with Principle 10 of the GICOP 20-01, which mandates that insurers must have a clear and accessible internal dispute resolution (IDR) process and must inform customers of their right to external dispute resolution (EDR) through FCA if they are not satisfied with the outcome of the IDR process. Providing this information proactively and without delay demonstrates transparency and commitment to fair customer treatment, fulfilling the insurer's obligations under the code. An incorrect approach would be to delay or omit informing the customer about FCA. This failure to provide clear and timely information about external dispute resolution options constitutes a breach of Principle 10 of the GICOP 20-01. It undermines the customer's right to seek an independent review of their complaint and can lead to frustration and a perception of unfair dealing. Ethically, it is unacceptable to withhold information that empowers a customer to seek a resolution. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest that the customer cannot go to FCA because the insurer believes its decision is final. This is a misrepresentation of the customer's rights. The GICOP 20-01 explicitly provides for external dispute resolution through FCA, regardless of the insurer's internal assessment of the claim's validity. This approach not only breaches the code, but also demonstrates a lack of understanding of the regulatory framework governing general insurance disputes in Australia. A further incorrect approach would be to advise the customer to seek legal advice before mentioning FCA. While legal advice may be appropriate in some complex cases, it should not be presented as a prerequisite to accessing FCA. FCA is designed to be an accessible and cost-effective dispute resolution service for all consumers, and directing customers solely towards legal avenues before informing them of their right to FCA can be seen as an attempt to dissuade them from using the EDR scheme, which is contrary to the spirit and letter of the GICOP 20-01. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the GICOP 20-01, particularly the principles relating to complaint handling and dispute resolution. When a customer expresses dissatisfaction that cannot be resolved internally, the immediate next step should be to review the customer's file against the requirements of Principle 10. This involves confirming that the internal dispute resolution process has been completed and that the customer has been clearly and comprehensively informed of their right to escalate the matter to ANZIIF, including how to do so. If this information has not been provided, it must be done promptly and without any attempt to dissuade the customer. Question 20. Analysis of the documentation process for an insurance claim interaction reveals that a customer is exhibiting signs of significant distress and difficulty in understanding the policy terms. The customer has mentioned recent personal hardship that may be impacting their cognitive clarity. What is the most appropriate method for documenting this interaction to ensure compliance with the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020 (GICOP) and uphold professional standards? Option A. Omit any specific mention of the customer's distress or difficulty in understanding, focusing only on the basic claim details to avoid unnecessary complexity. Option B. Include speculative personal opinions about the customer's emotional state and personal life circumstances that are not directly related to the insurance claim. Option C. Record a brief note stating the customer was difficult to deal with and seemed confused without further detail. Option D. Create a detailed, objective record of the customer's communication, observed signs of distress or confusion, and the specific steps taken by the insurer to provide clarity and support, ensuring all notes are factual and relevant to the claim. The correct answer is D. Create a detailed, objective record of the customer's communication, observed signs of distress or confusion, and the specific steps taken by the insurer to provide clarity and support, ensuring all notes are factual and relevant to the claim. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because insurers have a regulatory obligation under the General Insurance Code of Practice 2020 (GICOP) to ensure that vulnerable customers are treated fairly and with understanding. Documenting interactions with vulnerable customers requires a delicate balance between capturing necessary information for claim assessment and ensuring the customer's privacy and dignity are respected. The challenge lies in implementing a consistent and effective documentation process that meets regulatory requirements without causing undue distress or burden to the customer. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate level of detail and the method of recording, ensuring that the documentation is accurate, objective, and supports fair treatment. The correct approach involves creating a detailed, objective, and factual record of the interaction, including specific observations about the customer's communication style, any signs of distress or confusion, and the steps taken by the insurer to assist them. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the GICOP emphasis on fair treatment and the need for insurers to understand and respond appropriately to the circumstances of vulnerable customers. Documenting these aspects provides an auditable trail demonstrating the insurer's commitment to its obligations, supports internal training and quality assurance, and can be crucial in resolving disputes. It ensures that the insurer has a clear understanding of the customer's situation and the support provided, which is essential for making informed decisions about their claim. An incorrect approach would be to simply note that the customer was difficult or confused without further elaboration. This fails to meet the GICOP requirement for insurers to take reasonable steps to identify and assist vulnerable customers. Such a vague note does not provide actionable insights for colleagues or supervisors and could lead to the customer being unfairly categorized or their needs being overlooked in subsequent interactions. It also fails to demonstrate the insurer's proactive efforts to support the customer. Another incorrect approach would be to record highly personal or speculative details about the customer's emotional state or personal life that are not directly relevant to the insurance matter. This constitutes a breach of privacy and can be seen as unprofessional and potentially discriminatory. The GICOP requires insurers to handle customer information responsibly, and this approach would violate that principle by exceeding the necessary scope of documentation. A third incorrect approach would be to avoid documenting any specific details related to the customer's vulnerability, perhaps due to a desire to avoid complexity or potential scrutiny. This would be a failure to comply with the spirit and letter of the GICOP, which mandates that insurers actively consider and document how they are addressing the needs of vulnerable customers. This omission would leave the insurer unable to demonstrate compliance or to learn from the interaction, potentially leading to repeated issues for the customer and the insurer. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve first identifying potential indicators of vulnerability based on GICOP guidelines and internal training. Then, the focus should be on objective observation and factual recording of the interaction, noting any specific challenges encountered and the supportive actions taken. This documentation should be factual, concise, and relevant to the insurance matter, while respecting the customer's privacy. If unsure about the appropriate level of detail or how to record certain observations, seeking guidance from a supervisor or referring to internal policies and procedures is a critical step in ensuring compliance and best practice.